Beneath the blazing midday sun, Layla walked back and forth along the narrow hospital hallway, her arms wrapped firmly around herself. Her infant daughter, little Naya, lay in a ward nearby, resting after multiple medical procedures. The doctors had assured Layla they were doing all they could, yet the sorrow in her chest felt unbearable. Her thoughts drifted to the beginning of it all. Layla had always been a determined and warm-hearted young woman who lost her parents early on, ending up in an orphanage, where life was hard but somehow bearable. At 19, she left that place to seek employment and shelter. She managed to secure work as a nanny for a wealthy household in the metropolis. She oversaw their 2 kids, did the cleaning, prepared meals, and followed every instruction without complaint. She felt she owed them gratitude for offering her a job and was resolved to excel at it. But then, one dreadful evening, her life was torn apart. The family's son, a spoiled heir, barged into her modest room and assaulted her. Layla fought back, but he was far too strong. "Tristan, please stop. You'll ruin my life," she pleaded, but he persisted, forcing himself on her until he had satisfied his urges. Layla wept through the night, wiping away the bloodstains from her bedding. "He just seized my innocence," she sobbed. "Dear God, will my suffering never end? I can't believe I was even beginning to like someone so cruel." A few weeks afterward, she discovered she was pregnant. When his mother, Miss Faith, learned about it, rather than giving Layla any support, they threw her out. Layla begged them to listen, sharing with his parents that their son had violated her. Although they suspected she spoke the truth, they pretended otherwise to protect their family's name. Left with nowhere to go, Layla roamed the streets, slept in buildings still under construction, and sold bottled water during the daytime. Occasionally, people pitied her condition and gave her a bit more money. Layla purchased some necessities for her impending delivery, putting aside every small amount she could so she might afford a tiny rented room before her baby arrived. Following several months of hardship, Layla finally secured a modest home for herself and her newborn daughter, Naya. Despite the difficulties, she never lost hope. From her meager savings, she took care of her basic needs. Once Naya turned 4 months old, Layla resumed her job hunt. But every place she visited turned her down due to the baby strapped to her back. One afternoon, she showed up at a diner's door, seeking employment. The proprietor glanced at the child on her back, then sneered, "We're not running a charity here. How will you work if you're carrying a baby around? If you can't arrange a caregiver for her, don't bother applying. Now leave." Shattered, Layla returned to her small compound with tears in her eyes. She recognized she had to find someone to look after Naya so she could earn a living. Later that evening, she knocked on a neighbor's door. His name was Omar, a quiet man who worked from home and rarely had visitors. "Please," Layla implored, "could you watch my daughter for a week? It's tough to find a job while she's tied to my back." Omar nodded in agreement, taking the infant from her arms. At long last, Layla landed a position. She hoped to receive part of her salary up front to finance daycare for Naya, but her employer declined, stating, "Layla, we only give salary advances if you've been here at least 20 days. Layla felt cornered, unsure of her next steps. "Omar, could you please keep caring for my baby for just a bit longer? I can't get paid for 2 more weeks, and then I'll use that money to enroll her in daycare," she pleaded. Omar hesitated but finally said, "Only for 2 weeks. "Thank you," Layla whispered. Relieved, she left Naya with him each morning, providing porridge and formula for the baby. In the beginning, everything seemed normal, but soon Naya began to fall ill. Layla initially thought it was just a mild fever and tried to wait until payday, but her daughter's condition rapidly worsened. The swelling in her little body and constant restlessness frightened Layla. Desperate, she begged her boss for a partial advance. Thankfully, he conceded. Once at the hospital, the doctor examined Naya and called Layla into his office, his expression tense. "Madam," he said seriously, "this is hard to discuss, but I must ask. Do you have any idea how so much sperm got into your baby's system?" Layla's heart seemed to halt. "Doctor, I'm not following. What do you mean?" she murmured, alarmed. The physician exhaled heavily. "We found a significant amount of male fluid in her body. This shouldn't be there. She felt the world crumble beneath her feet. Her only suspect was Omar, the lone person she'd ever left her baby with. Though she struggled to accept it, she had to know the truth. The very next day, she pretended to go to work as usual, but instead hid near Omar's window to observe. Nothing happened the first day, but on the second, her worst nightmare was realized. Heart-hammering, Layla witnessed Naya crying, then saw Omar place himself against the baby in the most horrific way, urging her to perform an act on him. Layla covered her mouth, stifling her screams and trembling. She began recording the act on her phone. When she could take no more, she cried out, "Help! Everyone come quickly!" Neighbors rushed over, alarmed by her shouts, and saw the shock in her eyes. Then she showed them the recording. The compound erupted in outrage. Someone dialed the authorities, and they arrived swiftly to arrest Omar. Armed with video proof and the hospital's findings, Omar was given 5 years in prison. The judge also mandated that he pay Layla 5 million pesos so she could arrange the finest medical care for Naya. Layla used the funds to secure the treatments her daughter required. The doctors assured her Naya would recover fully, but it would take time for the baby's body to heal. Layla stayed in the hospital for a month, never leaving her child's side, watching over her and keeping her safe. She vowed never to be so trusting again. Though the path had been cruel, one fact was clear. She would defend her daughter no matter what. Sitting by Naya's bedside, Layla held her tiny hand, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the machines that indicated her child was stable. The medical team had done all they could, removing every harmful substance from the little body, but they insisted Naya needed patience and comfort to heal completely. The exhaustion of recent months weighed on Layla's shoulders. She had endured so much, yet more challenges lay ahead. She was alone in the world, but determined to give Naya the life she deserved. As she watched her daughter sleep peacefully, a calm but fierce resolve formed within her. She would not only survive, she would flourish. Once Naya was discharged, Layla understood she couldn't return to the previous grind. She needed a better job, safer housing, and a fresh start. A kindly nurse named Mrs. Innie had taken an interest in them during their hospital stay, frequently checking on Naya and offering Layla encouragement. One evening, as Layla gathered her things, Mrs. Innie pulled her aside. "Layla, I've noticed how strong you are," she remarked softly. "You remind me of my younger self." Layla gave a shy smile. "I don't feel all that strong." "But you are," insisted the nurse. "Hear me out. I have a friend who runs a catering enterprise. She's searching for dedicated women to train. You'll learn to bake, prepare meals, and potentially start your own shop one day. The pay isn't immediate, but in a few months you might be operating your own business." Layla's eyes widened in disbelief. "I've never considered anything like that," she admitted quietly. "I have no background in this field." "You can learn," Mrs. Innie assured her, "and I can give you a small financial boost." Overcome with emotion, Layla tried to hold back tears. She wasn't used to kindness, having endured so much on her own. "Thank you," she breathed. Soon after, Layla joined the training. She learned to bake cakes, cook savory dishes, and manage her finances. It wasn't easy balancing her studies with caring for Naya, but she persevered. With some of the money granted by the court, she found a better apartment in a more secure neighborhood, and she enrolled Naya in a modest daycare center. After several months, Layla distinguished herself among the trainees, impressing everyone with her grit and determination. Eventually, they helped her start a modest food operation of her own, making homemade snacks and meals for nearby employees and small stores. Her cooking delighted customers, who came back repeatedly. As her clientele expanded, she upgraded her utensils and equipment. Then, one day, she looked around her compact but thriving shop and realized that she had indeed succeeded in building something meaningful. In the spacious living room of Mr. and Mrs. Hughes, silence settled like a cloud as they stared at their son, Tristan, who had just made a stunning admission. His face was pale, and his hands shook as he avoided their eyes. "I forced myself on Layla," he said, voice trembling. "I hoped I could forget it, but I can't. Each night, I see her face. She was telling the truth, and we drove her away. She was expecting my child, and I turned my back on her." His mother stifled a gasp, pressing her hand to her mouth. Mr. Hughes' expression darkened furiously. "Tristan, do you grasp what you've done? You let us cast her out even though you knew you were at fault," he thundered. "Yes, Tristan," choked out. "I destroyed her life, but I want to make things right. I have to find her, and I have to find my child." Still reeling, his mother managed to speak. "We don't even know her location. It's been years. I'll find her," Tristan vowed, "and I'll need your help." The weight of his guilt bore down on him, leaving no room to escape. Raised in privilege, he no longer found any value in wealth, knowing how much the mother of his child had suffered on his account. A private investigator joined the search, but Layla was nowhere to be found. Weeks turned to months, yet Tristan kept going. He contacted shelters, orphanages, and searched through hospital records for any sign of her childbirth. Then, one day, exhausted and starved, he stopped at a nearby eatery for a plate of rice. The moment the server approached with his order, she lost her grip on the plate. "Layla," Tristan blurted, stunned. She turned to him, and the world seemed to stand still. He looked different, no longer the entitled boy she remembered. In his eyes, she saw something she never expected: genuine remorse. Layla's throat tightened. She had never anticipated crossing paths with him again. She had long since buried that chapter of her life and focused on raising Naya, throwing herself into her new venture. But there he stood, flesh and blood, right in front of her. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her tone chilly. Tristan swallowed nervously. "I've been a terrible person, selfish and heartless. I ruined everything for you, and I can't alter the past, but I want to try to repair the damage." "I'm so sorry, Layla. You believe you can stroll back into our lives after all. This time?" she challenged. "Have you any clue what I went through, what my child endured?" "No," Tristan conceded, "but I'm willing to learn. Please, Layla, just one chance. I want to meet my child." Layla stiffened at his words. "You're not worthy of that." "I understand," he whispered, "but I still hope to know her. Please." For the first time, Layla detected true torment in his eyes, remorse and regret woven together. Every fiber in her being screamed to dismiss him, but she realized Naya had a right to meet her father. That evening, after the shop closed, she sat down with her daughter. "My love," Layla began softly, "there's someone who wants to see you." Naya, now 5, looked puzzled. "Who is it, Mama?" Layla's heart clenched. "How do you explain such a thing to a child?" "It's your father," she said gently. Naya's eyes grew wide. "My father? Where's he been all this time?" Sadness welled up in Layla. "He made some errors," she responded quietly, "but he'd like to see you now." The little girl paused thoughtfully. "Will he love me?" Tears stung Layla's eyes. "I think he's learning how." When Naya finally met Tristan, she shrank back at first, hiding herself behind Layla's leg. Tristan lowered himself to her level, tears filling his eyes. "You're beautiful," he managed to say. Naya blinked, taking him in. "Are you really my dad?" "Yes," he replied, voice shaking. "And I'm so sorry I didn't come for you sooner." She studied him seriously before gingerly touching his cheek. "Why are you crying?" Tristan let out a jagged breath. "Because I love you already." Initially, Layla kept a strict boundary, allowing only brief encounters. But as time passed, she noticed Tristan's earnestness in making amends. He spent time with Naya, learning about her interests, sharing story time in the evenings, and occasionally assisting Layla with her cooking ventures. Mr. and Mrs. Hughes also sought Layla's forgiveness, haunted by what they had done. They offered to aid in Naya's future. Though it was challenging for Layla to let go of her anger, she understood that holding on to resentment hurt her most of all. She wasn't the naive, powerless girl they'd banished years before. She had found her strength,